welcome to Today in Woburn. I'm your host, Samantha Stone, and I'm thrilled today because we have several really interesting guests, and we're going to talk about things that are really important happening in our community. We're going to dive in today and start with our guest, Ed Quinn. Thank you so much for joining us, Ed.
Oh, my pleasure, Samantha. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm really glad that you've joined me today. We're talking about something that I think is important to a lot of us in the community, is understanding what ADA compliance is and means. And you were recently showcased in an editorial in some local papers. So we wanted to have this opportunity to dig in and understand this issue a little bit better. I'm so glad you could join us.
Thank you again.
Great. So for those who might not be familiar, tell us a little bit about what ADA is. It's American with Disabilities Act. Is that correct?
Yes, and it's actually a civil rights bill that was enacted under the Bush the Father's administration. It comes in three parts. Title I deals with employment issues for people with disabilities. Title II deals with states and local governments. And Title III deals with the general public, businesses, that kind of everything that the other two don't encompass, it does.
Right. And I'm going to probably summarize this terribly, so I want you to jump in and tell me where I'm misstating. But in general, the ADA is designed to make sure that all of our citizens, residents, have equal access to the services that we provide, or equal opportunity accommodations that might be required due to a medical condition or a physical limitation that they may have, to make sure that they can both work in the environment that they work in or utilize facilities that are publicly available.
Yeah, and what the intent of the law was to try to make sure that the services were equal and balanced. Accommodations could be made, and then in construction, things changed to make the access more generally equal. And that's really the key to it. Most people think that separate but equal is acceptable, but that is not the case. Unlike segregation was ruled out, so is separate but equal ruled out in the ADA. We're supposed to mirror pretty much all services so that somebody with any kind of disability can equally obtain the services that they're seeking.
Great. I appreciate that. Thank you for that. Maybe you could share just an example of a very common accommodation that all, buildings are designed to have in place to just make this something that people can really understand.
Well, I think you can look towards public meeting spaces and auditoriums, and having hearing assisted devices for people with hearing disabilities. That is something that's an accommodation that's been around since the very early days of the ADA. And it's, again, to be able to include people in all services.
Great. Thank you. That's a really good example. I know just recently my in-laws are both, unfortunately, in a nursing home, and they're well cared for, but we have not been able to visit very much over the last few months, as you might imagine. And we were able to visit over the weekend, and they actually had some hearing assisted devices for some of the residents at the nursing home so they could visit with their family, because they have to be 6 feet apart from each other. So in normal circumstances, we could show pictures and be very close and speak in a tone they could hear, but with the requirements for safety, they needed to supply. Now, I don't know that was a requirement by law for them to have, given as a visitation, but it certainly was something we appreciated being available to us.
Yep.
All right, great. So let's talk a little bit about our public spaces that are city served. For example, I know you visited the library recently. Tell us about some of the things that they have in place today that are designed to support our ADA requirements, and some of the areas that we might need to do some work to improve.
Well, I mean, with the construction of the new building, when it opened, it was completely handicap accessible. And under the law, the people who are really responsible for that, the architects, they have to sign off at the end of construction they risk their license if a building doesn't comply with the ADA, and they must certify that it does. And we've done that across the city in the schools that we've rebuilt. And so it's an accepted practice in the industry. It's a required practice here in Massachusetts, and we know it. What's changed has been this attempt to automate the library, particularly in circulation. And we're doing a good job as far as the check-in desks. They've changed. They've reconfigured the check-in desks where we have to sign in so that somebody who had issues could use the sign-in area much easier. They lowered the counters from that they were at. And that was a big step forward. And they started to put up some signage around the new automated machines, which again, the signage is somewhat important, but I don't think it goes quite far enough.
Okay. And tell us about some of the areas around the signage where we might need to update it.
Well, let me give you a great example. You go into a grocery store or a big box store such as Target or Lowe's, and you'll find self-checkout pretty common, whether it's a BJ's or whatever. But right adjacent to it is regular checkout. So that somebody who wasn't comfortable or wasn't capable of using the self-checkout had the opportunity to check out the same area in the same smooth fashion that anybody else would. The problem with the library right now is we've got machines that are down the entry hallway for checkout with no signage directing to a person who can handle somebody who isn't capable of using the machines. The other thing is, if you went and looked at your common ATM at your local bank, which we have them dotting all over Woburn, if you look very closely at the ATMs, you'll see such things as Braille on them for the controls. You'll see signage on the machines to indicate where you place your card, and even signage on your receipt. There is a touch screen, but for many people who have mobility issues, touch screens are not something that they can usually use. So without the signage, it further complicates the machines for them. Also, the machine does not have an ancillary counter space for somebody to put down something while they're fishing out their card or getting set up to operate the machine. The other thing that lacks is there's no signage directing them to a service desk where they can be checked out. The one service desk that is there, other than the check-in desk by the door, is down the far end of the hallway. There's no signage to the fact, and the handicapped height section of the desk has no plexiglass around it. So, and neither desk, when I've been in there, it's been manned 100% of the time because there are other duties that they have to do while they're working. So for that reason, because of proximity, because of lack of signage, because of the lack of proper protections, it's not compliant. It's not equal.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you for being such a great resident and spending the time to help us understand what we need to have. And I think it's so important that we do that. We really appreciate that and for explaining that. I do just want to ask a generalized question. So there are buildings that are very old that do not have the kind of accommodations that we would have in a building that was new today. Right. And so there is some disparity. For example, I imagine if you were to go to City Hall, right, you might not have all the things that we would have in a building that was recently renovated, correct?
Well, yes and no. City Hall is actually very compliant because you're not, under the ADA, we weren't required to tear down all public space and rebuild it as we would today. Although Woburn has done a huge job in our schools. And even without looking at the new schools built, we did ADA upgrades for both of the middle schools And we brought the high school, the old high school, very much into compliance at the time prior to its demolishing and being rebuilt. So, and City Hall may on the surface not look like a new building and may not look fully compliant, but it has all of the things that are necessary to make it compliant. Now, compliance doesn't mean that you get to use every nook and cranny of a building, but it means that the program in the building, you have 100% the same accessibility as anybody else. And you will find that in City Hall.
Well, thank you for that. Just because I'm a little bit nosy, tell me about your background. This is something you obviously know a lot about. Tell us about how you know all of this, and we really appreciate it.
Well, it goes way back. I had a cousin who was very close in age, who broke his neck in an accident and was confined to a wheelchair. And so as a family, and I come from a very large family, we were very much involved in fundraising and raising money for medical here in Massachusetts. So I got very involved. And when the Architectural Access Board came into, which is the Massachusetts law that predates ADA, I became more familiar with it because I was sort of involved in the building with my brother, who had a building company up in New Hampshire. So then I was a trustee for my children's school, and the ADA came in and they needed somebody who could help them, guide them through the new law. So I did the training with the Mass Office on Disability. And this beginning, it was a 2-day training. It was a half day of classwork and then a day of evaluating a building that an owner allowed us to go through and look at all the things. And periodically we did refresher courses, and I've done 5 over the years. And I've done probably 35 evaluations over the years for various businesses, for schools. I was on the team that did the old Woburn High School, so that we looked at that and made recommendations on the changes in order to bring that up into compliance prior to its reconstruction.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate all the time you've put into, being ready and trained and understanding this and helping us make it understandable for the rest of us who don't have all of that background. I'm optimistic and hopeful that the things that you have shared will continue to help us be compliant in all the places that we serve our residents and make sure we have access for everyone. Thank you, Ed, so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great. Well, now I'd like to introduce Tim Donovan, who's joining us. He's the chair of the Handicapped Commission. So talk a little bit, not just about the ADA, as Ed and I have discussed, but in general, what the commission is all about and your role there, Tim.
Okay. Well, currently we're actually restarting the Handicapped Commission. It's sort of been defunct for the last probably 3 or 4 years, where membership had sort of trailed off, and but we've just recently had 7 other additional people appointed to the commission. So we're getting that underway and hope to have that officially organized in the next month or 2. People are currently being sworn in, and we're going to organize to try and have a monthly meeting once a month. And so in general, I'm excited to get that going again. I've been Ed was on the Handicap Commission for several years before me, and I joined and served several years alongside him. And our goal of the commission is just as appointed members is just to sort of ensure that the laws, both federal and state, are being enforced, to review other new laws that are coming out, work with other city departments to make sure they're in compliance, but also advocating for all citizens of the city of Woburn for whatever disability they may have, for housing, transportation, employment, things like that. So that's our goal. We've spent a lot of time looking at, over the years, looking at projects that have been referred to us by other boards or commissions to see if they may have any compliance issues. So that's our objective as a commission.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. I'm very Sad to hear we're on hiatus for so long, but thrilled that we are back on track and you have some fantastic new membership to move that forward. I know that they're excited to jump in and help out our community. One of the things that I think when people hear the name of the commission, we think of people in a wheelchair, perhaps. We may think of someone who might have a significant vision impairment, but there are a wide range of different kinds of challenges that our residents may have that this commission is designed to help serve and make sure they can have access to all the things that they need to. Tell us a little bit about when you're looking at a project or evaluating it or giving advice to something that's being built, what are some of the things that you're thinking about?
Well, we're thinking about a lot of things, primarily physical access, vision, hearing. You have instances, most buildings are all about physical access, as Ed had mentioned, reach as far as heights and access to get indoors, having compliant door handles to just enter a building, having the right door pressure for someone who has to open a door. We have several different variations of different disabilities, and everyone is different. So there is a general requirement, and they keep it that for across all disabilities. As far as, for instance, access to a building should have a door 10 pounds pressure on the exterior door, 5-pound pressure on the interior door, and that's something that most people don't think about. They may find a heavy door, but someone with a disability may find it extremely challenging to have anything that's not set at those levels. So we also think about street lights and crossing signals, where someone with a hearing impairment may need the vision to be able to see when that sign changes and see the count and time left to be able to cross the street. Are also hearing impaired, a vision impaired, that they may at least hear it, hear the chirping of the signal saying that instructs them to walk. So we're looking, and we all do our best. We're a collection of different backgrounds on the commission, and some have firsthand knowledge and others don't, but we try and study the laws, the regulations of the ADA and the city's ordinances, and just make sure we're trying to do our best to be in compliance and making sure the city's in compliance. But we also hear complaints from residents or concerns just in general of access in the city for whatever disability is, and we try and act on that to sort of ensure that not only it's compliant, but making those accommodations for the citizens of Woburn.
Well, we really appreciate all the hard work that you do and that the commission's going to be doing as it's now fully staffed. One of the areas that I think is less clear, whether it's under the commission or not, or might be individuals who have communication disabilities, someone who might have autism or many other forms of communication challenges that are out there. Is that covered in the work that you do? Or are you mostly focused on physical access to different types of facilities?
No. Anyone that falls on the ADA is where our commission would be, cover those areas. Now, again, we're not all experts on the on any specific issue. We may have to study that that part of the ADA and see what the regulations are, but also discuss that with the potential individuals and get a first-hand knowledge of what they may experience. But we try and address every concern that that's someone who falls under the ADA and with a disability may encounter. We also do advocacy for and public awareness of disability issues in the city, and we've in the past we've actually funded American Sign Language programs at the high school, and which is we had an extremely good turnout of interested students that got involved in that, which we thought was a great program, and I think it's something that will be helpful for those individuals that took it, and hopefully they go on to help make that easier for those individuals with that are in need of sign language. And it's a great just a tool to have as a individual.
I love that example. One of my children took classes at RIT, and they're actually very well known for having one of the best hearing impaired programs at a college or university. So everywhere you went, there were people who were signing or using other types of tools and resources. And it was lovely to see because they were working really hard to make sure that everybody felt part of the community in all the places, whether it's in the cafeteria or on the quad or certainly in the classrooms. And so it was a gift to be able to observe that in action. And one of the things that I learned was they couldn't hold enough sign language classes. Everybody wanted to take them. They really wanted to support their peers in their community, and they were always some of the first classes to sell out during registration time. So it's really fun to hear that we have had that in the past.
We've got a very similar population of kids. It was not a little somewhat surprising to see how many students were actually interested in taking part. So the classes appeared to be full according to the school. So we're very happy with that program.
Good. Well, I want to thank you. I have just a couple more questions for you. I know you're just getting back into the groove of meetings and such. One of the things that I've heard different feedback from different community members about the name of the commission and whether a handicap commission is the right name for it or not. I don't personally have an opinion, but I'm interested to hear if that's something that has been raised to you in the past and if there's any discussion about that.
Well, I think in today's world, there's always, I guess, sensitivity to a lot of, I guess, to names or phrases or what have you that may have been acceptable in the past that may not, maybe was sensitive today. I don't necessarily, find that many people have made any real issue of that. Some people it may offend, but I guess it's all the whole connotation of the word and how it's used. I know the ADA at one point early on changed it to be suggested it to be persons with disabilities as opposed to handicap. But then you look at their universally accepted parking sign, and what does it say on it? Handicap parking. So it's, and that's the universally accepted. That's the one they say you must use to be in compliance. So they still allow the word to be used, handicap, but they suggest people rephrase that to persons with disabilities. I think obviously we're trying to make sure people understand these are people, and just like everyone else, it's a person. We haven't, it's maybe something that maybe a topic of discussion that we may change it. Hopefully, it's something, again, it's a connotation, and hopefully people don't use it in a negative way where it would offend someone, and it's just a sort of a phrase that can be used, and we'll determine that and maybe consider if we need to change the name of the commission as we regather.
Great. Well, last thing, and then I'm going to let you go, Tim. I really appreciate your time. What are some of the ways that residents can help support the mission of the Handicap Commission?
Well, again, we work for advocacy. It's great that people be involved. I mean, I think we'll work on programs when we regroup to advocate and get maybe set up some programs that we feel would help the citizens of Woburn that are in need and that would fall under the Handicap Commission sphere that may help them. And I think that would be nice to see. Maybe volunteers help out those causes if we're able to bring those programs to fruition. But I think in general, just be general awareness of a typical concern around the community is we see how many times people use a handicap parking spot, and they just, I see it firsthand that, and people's intentions aren't bad. Their intention is, I'm just going in that store for a minute, and I'm coming right out. And you get that response when they do come out and they say, hey, listen, do you know you're in a handicap parking spot and you don't have a tag or anything displayed? And they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, I was just going in for a minute, or they might get a little more defensive about it. But in general, it's more, I was just going in for a minute. But in general, they don't think about it, that everyone else is only going in for a minute, and everyone else spent the time to go parking in a space that was, not handicap parking. Those spaces are for a purpose. And when you have someone come down the street in a car that is in need of that space, and someone that isn't really allowed to park in the space and they're in it, that person now has to go further down the street and maybe inclement weather to park their vehicle, and that person now comes out and removes their car and takes off, and the person's already gone by and parked somewhere else a further distance away, and now is risking themselves on ice or what have you, snow, to get to the store because someone was illegally parked. And it was, even though it's only a few minutes, it's just, they need to be aware of it, that it's, just don't park there. You wouldn't park in a fire lane, so don't park in a handicap parking spot.
Well, thank you for that reminder. So I think for those of us who are watching, and that's some great advice here to remember that those things are put in place for a reason, and to honor the spirit of them, to help volunteer as new programs come out, and to help raise concerns if you see them. And generally, as always, to continue to take care of each other and be good neighbors, and help find new ways to help each other out. Thank you both for joining me so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.